You let her sit in the veterans section. That spot's for real pilots. The laughter rippled through the crowd until she took off her coat. Nice tattoo, one cadet scoffed. Did she get that at a Comic-Con? Another chuckled. Broken eagle? How fitting. A third leaned in, sneering. Maybe it's her way of saying she crashed. When her shoulder was exposed, time stopped. A broken winged eagle, Unit 077, the tattoo that was supposed to have died with the mission. The Commandant dropped his speech. The past just stood up in front of his face. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories from Veteran Biker, where true respect is never assumed. The sunlight glinted off the polished brass railings as the cadets lined up in perfect formation at the Colorado Springs Air Force Academy. Flags flanked the stage. Families gathered in neat rows of white folding chairs, murmuring in anticipation. Photographers milled about. At the very back of the ceremony, just before the very important person section, a woman in a simple charcoal blazer stood alone. Bella Holt. She adjusted the silver pin on her lapel, one that bore no rank, no name, just the outline of an eagle. Her eyes scanned the parade field. Not a single familiar face. Not that she expected any. It had been 13 years since she wore the uniform, and nearly as long since anyone in the Air Force had acknowledged her by name. Her invitation to the graduation was an anomaly, tucked inside a plain envelope and signed simply, Honored Guest, Veteran Division. It didn't say why. Bella moved quietly through the crowd. A young cadet holding a program glanced at her, then looked away. Another frowned, whispering something to a friend. By the time she reached the edge of the seating area marked Veteran Honored Pilots, a low murmur had spread. She stepped toward the front row. "Excuse me, ma'am." A staff sergeant in dress blues intercepted her. "These seats are for honored veterans." "I know," Bella replied, calmly showing the tag clipped to her blazer. He studied it. Something flickered across his face. Uncertainty? Then duty reasserted itself. "I'll have to double-check with the roster, ma'am." Behind them, a young man in cap and gown muttered, not quietly enough. Maybe someone brought their auntie to the wrong section. Laughter rippled. Bella said nothing. She took a step back. 2 rows behind, an older gentleman in a wheelchair looked up at her, nodded once. His name tag read Colonel Thomas Reed Rhett. She nodded back. No one else did. She was directed to the very last row of the veteran seating, near the line between sun and shade. She sat down without protest. Her coat remained on. On the stage, a brass band began the ceremony with a flourish of horns. The Commandant of Cadets, General Malcolm Stratton, took the podium. Cameras swiveled toward him. Applause erupted. Somewhere nearby, a broadcast drone hovered silently, and in the crowd, a circle of cadets whispered among themselves, "She's sitting way too close. Must be someone's mom. Wait, look at her shoulder." Bella had slipped off her coat. The heat was too much and the sun had started to sting. She rolled her shoulders and stretched slightly, and the murmurs grew louder. The left shoulder of her sleeveless blouse revealed a tattoo, not flashy, not colorful, stark black ink. A bird eagle shaped, its wings uneven. One wing stretched full, the other snapped and ragged. Underneath, 077. One cadet squinted. "Is that real?" Another snorted. "Nice tattoo. Did she get that at a Comic-Con? Broken eagle?" "How fitting," said another. A taller one leaned closer, voice oozing with mockery. Maybe it's her way of saying she crashed. Laughter erupted, soft but cruel. General Stratton paused mid-speech. He looked up from his note cards. Something in the crowd had caught his attention. His eyes scanned the front row of veterans, then further back. His gaze stopped. Bella sat motionless, watching him. His jaw slackened. He blinked hard. The cards in his hand slipped. They scattered across the podium. No one noticed at first. The cameras stayed trained on his face, but the general, man who had delivered dozens of speeches without flaw, stood paralyzed. His mouth opened, then closed. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice shaky, "before I continue, I need to acknowledge someone." The crowd murmured. His hand trembled. He reached toward the microphone again. I need to recognize a guest I did not expect to see today." He stepped away from the podium, ignoring the assistant trying to hand him the speech cards. His boots echoed on the wood as he walked down the steps. Toward Bella. All eyes followed him. She stood slowly, not out of pride, but instinct. The general stopped a few feet in front of her. For several seconds he said nothing. Then he raised a hand, not in salute, not in command, but in recognition. "Lieutenant Holt," he said, voice tight. "I thought you were gone." Gasps. Even the cadets who had mocked her now stared, eyes wide. One cadet dropped his cap, another took a slow, disbelieving step backward. Bella gave a small nod. "They tried to erase me." General Stratton's face twisted, guilt, anger, and disbelief all warring in his expression. "I remember he said quietly. "You brought back the only plane that made it out." Whispers surged through the audience. "That unit was blacklisted," someone said. "I thought they were wiped out. She's from 077? General Stratton turned back toward the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to reintroduce you to the pilot of the Impossible Return, the woman who flew through fire and silence." He turned to Bella. "If you're willing, would you sit where you truly belong?" He gestured to the front row. Bella hesitated, but slowly she stepped forward. As she passed the rows of cadets, they parted. No more laughter, only stunned silence. And the eagle on her shoulder caught the sunlight again, broken-winged and unforgotten. Bella sat motionless in the seat General Stratton had offered her. Front row, stage left, square in view of the cameras and cadet formation. She could feel the shift in the air around her. No longer just heat and sun, but pressure, stares, uncertainty. Behind her, cadets who had whispered cruel jokes now kept stiffly silent. Their eyes occasionally flicked to her shoulder, to the emblem of the broken-winged eagle inked into her skin. It was all too familiar. She had been here once before, long ago, not in this exact seat, not under this spotlight, but in uniform, among peers, and always on edge, always braced for the next test, the next judgment. And once, not that long ago, she almost walked away from all of it. The invitation had arrived without warning, printed on stiff cardstock, with embossed lettering and a signature she hadn't seen in a decade. For days it sat unopened on her kitchen counter. She told herself it was theater, PR damage control, a stage salute to ghosts no one dared name. She had stood over her old flight jacket, lighter in hand, the 077 patch already unstitched and folded in her palm. One flick of the flame, and it would all be ash. But she couldn't do it. She couldn't pretend it never happened, because the world already had. But this was different. General Stratton returned to the podium, his voice steadier now, but not fully recovered. He spoke of legacy, of sacrifice, of service, his words unusually weighty, shaped by the unplanned recognition that had just unraveled tradition. The crowd applauded, but it was muted, contemplative. Bella didn't smile. She wasn't there for applause. As the ceremony progressed, the newly commissioned officers took the oath. They raised their right hands in unison, repeating the words of loyalty and honor. Bella's eyes swept over their faces, young, proud, untested. Some glanced at her mid-oath. Her presence had altered their ceremony. For better or worse, she had become a symbol. When the last name was called and cadets tossed caps into the air, a ripple of cheers followed, but not as thunderous as usual. The silence that Bella had carried with her into the academy had begun to seep outward. She stood quietly. A few press members approached, but she declined interviews. General Stratton met her at the foot of the stage. "You shouldn't have been invited anonymously," he said. "I wasn't supposed to be invited at all," she replied. He exhaled, jaw clenched. I didn't know. About your record. About how they buried it? He nodded. She looked toward the sky. A flyby was scheduled, a final tradition for every graduating class. But the jets hadn't yet appeared. They had no choice, Bella said. 077 wasn't meant to be remembered. I'm changing that, Stratton said, starting today. He handed her a lanyard. Attached was a laminated pass labeled All Access, AFA Guest of Honor. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. He gestured toward the hangar complex beyond the ceremony grounds. There's something you need to see, he said. They walked in silence, flanked by two aides who said nothing but exchanged glances. The closer they drew to the restricted hangars, the more Bella's posture changed, less relaxed, more alert, muscle memory. Most of this area's been converted for drone testing, Stratton explained, but one corner we kept intact. He keyed in a code. The door unlocked with a heavy mechanical groan. Inside was a museum-like space, dim, climate-controlled, lined with artifacts and sealed files. A preserved piece of fuselage bore the faded numbers 077. Bella stopped cold. Her throat tightened. Her feet refused to move further. There it is, Stratton said softly. The one that came home. She stepped closer. The chunk of metal was riddled with pockmarks and burn scars, but it was unmistakable. The torn insignia, the broken eagle, the soot-scarred paint. Her hands hovered inches from it, but she didn't touch. Why? Why is this still here? She whispered. Stratton folded his arms. Because someone on the board insisted it be archived, not destroyed. And because part of me, part of many of us, knew your story wasn't over. A monitor beside the panel flickered on. Grainy footage played, her aircraft limping across a hostile skyline, flames trailing from the undercarriage. The camera shook violently. Combat drone footage, static cut in and out. The label read, Operation Ghost Reach, Com Sector. Bella's jaw clenched. The words brought her back to the cockpit. The smell of scorched wiring, the shriek of damaged turbines, the silence in her headset where 6 other voices should have been. Why show me this now? Stratton didn't answer right away. He walked to a nearby file cabinet and retrieved a slim folder, stamped across the front, declassified, Level 4. He handed it to her. Because the Air Force owes you the truth. Bella opened the file. The first page bore her name, the second an order of dismissal, but stamped diagonally in red ink, voided, reinstated in absentia. She blinked. What is this? Stratton's voice was low. Someone tried to undo what was done, quietly, without fanfare. It didn't reach you because of chain of command politics. You were technically reinstated 6 years ago, but no one told you. Her hands trembled. I thought I was dishonorably discharged. You were, then you weren't, then you vanished. And we let you. That's on us. Bella shut the folder, holding it to her chest. In that moment, the flyby roared overhead. The sky split with white trails, jets screaming past in perfect formation. Stratton and the aides looked up, but Bella didn't. Her eyes remained fixed on the remains of 077. You know what the hardest part was? She said, almost to herself. It wasn't the crash. It wasn't the silence. It was waking up every day knowing I was still alive and wondering if that was the mistake. Stratton looked at her, and for once the general had no words. Come with me, he said instead. There's one more place I want you to see. They left the hangar. This time, no one else followed. He took her to a memorial garden tucked behind the dormitory halls. It was quiet, shaded by tall evergreens, dotted with plaques and flags. At the far end stood a small pillar of black granite. The inscription in memory of the silent wings, Unit 077 MIA, 6 status, unresolved. She stood in front of it, unmoving. Stratton's voice was barely audible. Until now. Bella traced her fingers over the names etched into the stone. "I buried them," she said, "not in coffins, but in silence." Then it's time they spoke again. For a long time, neither moved. When Bella finally turned away, something had shifted in her eyes. Not peace, not yet, but direction. "You said you're changing things," she said. "Then don't just honor me. Reopen the file. Clear their names." Stratton nodded once. Done. As they turned back toward the stage, Stratton stepped onto the platform again to gather his notes. His hand trembled. A single sheet slipped loose and floated to the floor. Bella caught sight of it as it landed face up beside her boot. In bold red type, one line stood out: "Mission Ghost Reach, classified." Presumed dead, an aide reached to grab it but paused, catching Stratton's eye. Cadets nearby froze. No one spoke. Bella looked down at the words, then back at the sky. "I was never the ghost," she said softly, "just the memory they tried to bury." The ceremony had ended. The crowd was dispersing, but for Bella Holt, the real mission had only just begun. 3 days after the ceremony, Bella Holt stood on the tarmac of Peterson Space Force Base, wind sweeping her curls across her face. She stared up at the C-130 transport plane looming above her like a relic of her past. The hangar bay behind her bustled with mechanics and personnel, but her presence drew subtle glances. Whispers passed along with clipboard reports. She wasn't in uniform, not officially, but the reinstatement documents tucked in her side bag said otherwise. She had returned, not for glory, not for vengeance, for answers. The Air Force had agreed, after internal review prompted by General Stratton's intervention, to open an inquiry into Operation Ghost Reach. Files that had remained buried for nearly a decade were finally being pulled from the dark corners of bureaucracy. Bella had requested one thing in return: let her see it through. At first the brass resisted, then the footage from the graduation went viral. Millions had seen the broken-winged eagle. Millions had heard the name 077, and someone high enough had quietly agreed. Let her walk. Her boots echoed on the metal ramp as she boarded the C-130. Inside, seated on the side benches, were 6 younger officers, investigative aides from the Judge Advocate General's office. Most avoided eye contact, though 1 or 2 offered stiff nods. One leaned forward, a woman in crisp digital camo with a quiet voice. "Ma'am, I read your file. It's an honor." Bella offered a brief nod. "That file's incomplete. That's why we're here." The engines roared to life. As they lifted off, Bella stared out the small porthole. Below, the green and brown of Colorado gave way to endless desert. Her mind drifted. Come. She hadn't spoken the name aloud since the day she left. The wreckage had never been recovered. The site itself was declared lost after diplomatic restrictions shut down military access. That had changed recently. An agreement brokered under new terms gave her one window to inspect the crash site. When the plane landed at Al Dhafra Air Base in the UAE, she barely noticed the heat. Her eyes were fixed on the American liaison waiting at the edge of the tarmac, Colonel David Mercer. Clean-shaven, tall, in his 50s, he extended a hand. "Lieutenant Holt, you're causing quite the stir." "Not my goal," she replied. "No, but necessary. Come with me." Inside the command tent, a large digital map displayed the region surrounding red zones marked still hostile territories. A blinking dot showed the extraction point they'd be allowed to visit. Only a 20-minute window. "That's all they'll give us," Mercer said. "After that, we're out. No exceptions." Bella nodded. "That's all I need." She suited up. The vest felt heavier than she remembered. The helmet smelled of new polymers, not old sweat and sand. She strapped in beside the team inside a Black Hawk and tried not to think of how many of these flights she'd taken and how few had returned. As the helicopter skimmed low over the desert, a voice cut in over the comms. Approaching coordinates. 10 minutes. She glanced down. The landscape shifted. Dunes gave way to broken rocks, then to scorched black earth. And then she saw it. Twisted metal, debris is half buried in sand, scorch marks that still hadn't faded. The crash site. They touched down hard. Bella leapt out first. The moment her boots hit the earth, her breath caught. It was all still here. The burned remains of her squad's aircraft. The nose cone of Bravo 7. A half-melted wing panel from Alpha 9. And near the edge of a shallow crater, the skeleton of her own jet. Ghost reached Delta. She moved fast, and the others struggled to keep up. She stopped at a piece of fuselage bearing the remains of a name, McCrae, her CO pilot, gone before the final descent. She knelt beside the debris, fingers tracing the soot-coated steel. A low beep sounded in her ear. The timer. "Lieutenant Holt," Mercer called. 10 minutes. "I know," she said. She rose and headed toward what had once been the cargo hold. One of the JAG officers, Lieutenant Sarah Wexler, followed. Her voice was nervous. "Ma'am, is there something specific you're looking for?" Bella paused. "Yes." She pointed to the cracked remnants of a flight recorder panel. "That." They pried open the panel together. Behind it, hidden beneath heat-damaged casing, was the charred shell of a black box. Bella held it up. Wexler's eyes widened. "We were told nothing was recoverable. They were wrong." She handed the box off to Mercer's team. "Get it to the lab, fast." The timer beeped again. 3 minutes, came the call. Bella took one last look. Her breath caught again, not from memory but from something else. A glint of silver in the sand. She moved toward it. Dog tags, 6 of them scattered, some buried, others blackened, but she knew each name by touch alone. Warren, Diaz, McCrae, Fenn, Lynn, Rojas. Her team. She gathered them silently, palms trembling. "Time's up!" Mercer called. She clutched the tags tightly and ran. Back aboard the Black Hawk, the silence was different. The JAG officers looked shaken. Mercer didn't speak. Bella sat apart, staring down at the dog tags in her hands. The past wasn't buried. It was waiting. Back at base, the black box was rushed to a secure facility. A tech team began extraction. Hours passed. Bella paced outside. Wexler emerged first, eyes wide. "You need to hear this." Inside the lab, a distorted audio file played. Static filled the first few minutes, then voices, shouting, chaos, explosions, and then Bella's voice. "Control, this is Delta Actual. We're hit. Ghost reaches compromised. 6 down. I repeat, 6 down." Silence. Then another voice. "Delta Actual, abort mission. Do not attempt recovery. Repeat, do not retrieve assets." Bella's jaw clenched. She remembered now that order, the one she disobeyed. "Negative control," her voice said on the tape. "I'm bringing them home." The recording ended. Wexler looked at her. "You were ordered to abandon them." Bella nodded. "And they punished you for refusing." Bella stepped back into the Suheat, pressed down, but she welcomed it. At least now the world would hear the truth. The storm began not in the sky, but in inboxes and phone lines. 48 hours after the audio from the recovered flight recorder was decrypted and authenticated, the ripples reached the Pentagon. What had once been whispers about a classified mission, a buried pilot, and an act of disobedience that turned into salvation were now headlines. The Air Force issued a brief statement confirming that a routine declassification review was underway, but behind closed doors, nothing about it was routine. Bella Holt, the forgotten pilot of Unit 077, was no longer just a footnote. She had become a question mark the Department of Defense didn't know how to answer. In Colorado Springs, Bella sat alone in a quiet office on base, watching the media coverage scroll by on a muted TV screen. Her name in bold, her voice from the black box replayed over dramatic background music. Panels of retired officers debated whether she was a hero or a liability. None of them had been in that cockpit. Lieutenant Sarah Wexler entered carrying 2 folders. She hesitated before placing them on the table. "The committee wants your statement before noon," Wexler said. "Which committee?" Bella asked, not looking up. "Technically, a joint review board, but unofficially, everyone who ever tried to bury 077. Bella reached for the first folder. "Let them read what they buried." Wexler stayed quiet. Outside, a small crowd had started to gather at the base gate. Veterans, reporters, young cadets holding handwritten signs. Some read, "Welcome back, Lieutenant Holt." Others, "Honor 077. The image of the tattoo had spread like wildfire. For many, it had become a symbol, not just of one mission, but of every soldier, sailor, or pilot silenced by bureaucracy. General Stratton arrived just before noon. "They're nervous," he said. "Good," Bella replied. "They're not just worried about exposure," Stratton continued. "They're worried about accountability." She looked at him. "Will you stand with me?" His reply was instant. "Yes." The review board convened via secure video conference. The panel included 2 generals, a civilian defense official, 1 congressional liaison, and a silent observer from the intelligence community. Bella sat centered in the frame, shoulders squared, wearing a plain collared shirt. No medals, no uniform, just presence. The questioning began cautiously, establishing timelines, reconfirming details of Operation Ghost Reach, but when they arrived at the moment of disobedience, the tone shifted. "Lieutenant Holt," one general said, "you ignored a direct order to abort recovery." "Yes, why?" Bella leaned forward slightly. "Because 6 of my people were out there. They weren't assets. They were lives. And leaving them behind was the real betrayal." Silence. Another voice joined in, this one the civilian. "You understood that acting against command could end your career?" "I expected it would," Bella answered. "And yet you proceeded." "I did what I was trained to do, bring my team home." Stratton, watching from just outside the frame, felt his fists clench. The restraint in her voice made her defiance more powerful. When the session ended, the panel went into private deliberation. Bella and Stratton walked outside. The crowd had grown. A group of academy cadets approached. One, tall, nervous, held out his training manual. "Ma'am, could you sign this?" Bella hesitated, then nodded. As she scribbled her initials, she caught sight of something tucked into the young cadet's sleeve. A sketch, crude but clear, a broken-winged eagle. Wordless, she handed the book back and turned to Stratton. "If they try to shut this down." "They won't," he said. "Not now." Later that evening, Stratton received a call from Washington. He listened without speaking. When he hung up, he turned to Bella. "They're issuing a formal statement tomorrow. Partial exoneration, commendation for bravery. No apology." Bella blinked. "Cowards. They're also naming a new flight leadership award after you." She snorted. "Give it to someone who needs it." Wexler entered then, holding a secure tablet. "You need to see this." On the screen was footage, not from the crash, not from the graduation, from a surveillance drone. Timestamp, the day of the crash, location Kum sector. The footage showed Bella's jet struggling to stay aloft, but something else was visible. 2 more jets, flanking her for a brief moment, before peeling away. "Those weren't ours," Wexler said. "No record, no insignia." Stratton stepped closer. "You think someone else was involved?" Bella stared at the screen. "No. I think someone wanted us to fail." That single sentence reignited everything. The mission parameters of Ghost Reach had always been classified. But this raised a new possibility. Sabotage, interference, a political trap disguised as a military maneuver. Wexler frowned. "What kind of trap?" Bella's voice was low. "The kind where you're not supposed to come back." The next few days blurred. Meetings, interviews, requests from journalists, senators, even foreign correspondents. Bella declined most. Her focus remained on one thing: find the truth. She and Wexler began compiling everything: mission briefings, intercepted comms, unredacted files newly accessible thanks to Stratton's influence. What emerged was damning. The unit had been sent in under incomplete intelligence. The target zone was misrepresented. Reinforcements had been denied. And when things went sideways, the command directive had shifted from extraction to containment. They'd wanted no survivors. Bella's survival was the flaw in the plan. "They used us," she whispered to Wexler one night. "We were bait." Wexler didn't disagree. In a moment of clarity, Bella made a decision. "I'm going to speak. Publicly." Stratton initially resisted. "You'll be dragged through everything again. Are you ready for that?" "No," she said, "but I'm not doing it for me." A week later, she stood at the steps of the Air Force Memorial in Arlington, cameras flashing. Behind her, flags flapped against a clear blue sky. Before her, veterans, families, and service members gathered. "I was never meant to speak again," Bella began. "They thought silence would be enough. That time would erase the truth. But here we are." She told the story, not just of 077, but of how silence can be weaponized, how loyalty can be punished, and how honor demands resistance. The speech was broadcast live. It trended for hours, and though the Department of Defense didn't respond officially, change had begun. New review boards were formed, old missions were re-examined, and in cadet dorm rooms across the country, sketches of broken-winged eagles began to appear. They weren't mourning symbols, they were battle standards. Bella Holt, once erased, was now impossible to ignore. Bella Holt had never been more visible, and never more alone. The morning after her Arlington speech, she walked the length of Memorial Row at Fort Myer. The statues cast long shadows in the rising sun. She paused at one bronze plaque depicting a flight crew in mid-rescue. Her reflection stared back at her, warped by the metal. She hadn't slept. Sleep meant silence. Silence meant memories. The fallout from her revelations was immediate. Public support surged. Hashtags trended. Military families reached out with similar stories of buried missions, dishonored discharges, forgotten heroes. But behind the flood of empathy came the undertow. Official statements of context, half-hearted endorsements, quiet warnings to back down. Bella didn't. In a secure conference room in D.C., Stratton, Wexler, and Bella met with a group of congressional staffers and one quietly attentive Senate Intelligence Committee member, Senator Keely Armand. Former Army JAG. Known for pursuing corruption and cover-ups, she listened without interrupting for over an hour. Then she said, "You're telling me not only was Unit 077 sent into a compromised AO, but higher-ups gave an abort directive knowing your people were still alive?" "Yes, ma'am," Bella said. "And they punished you for defying it?" "Yes." Senator Armand looked at Stratton. "And you're confirming this, General?" With regret, he said, "I was not part of the operation, but I verified the evidence." Armand leaned back. "I want a full intelligence briefing, and I want to reopen the investigation under oversight jurisdiction." Bella expected relief, but what she felt was nothing, just numb. That night, alone in a borrowed quarters room on base, she opened a box she hadn't touched in 10 years. Inside were 6 letters, one from each of her lost crewmates, all written in the final week before deployment. She'd kept them sealed. She opened Warren's first. It was a crude drawing, mostly jokes. At the bottom, "If we go down, at least we'll go loud." She smiled, but her eyes stung. Then she opened Diaz's. "If you're reading this, Holt, I didn't make it. Don't let them say we didn't matter." She closed the lid. The next morning, Bella asked to visit the National Military Archive in Quantico. She and Wexler were granted temporary access to classified microfiche storage. What they found deepened the crisis. The name of the officer who had signed the abort order was redacted in most copies, but on one carbon-scanned memo, the signature had bled through the black marker. Colonel Travis Beringer. Wexler's eyes widened. That's the same Beringer who now sits on the board of Aerodyne Tactical. Bella's pulse sharpened. They manufactured the same drone models used in recon during Ghost Reach. They dug deeper. Flight logs, procurement contracts, timing, patterns. Ghost Reach had never been designed to succeed. It had been designed to test real-time drone warfare in a high-failure scenario, with human squadrons acting as decoys. Bella and her team had been the cover. The drones had pulled back not because they were outgunned, but because they were ordered to. Jesus, Wexler muttered, this was never just about you. This was weapons testing. And we were the disposable variables, Bella said. She stood up. Get me Stratton! That night, they confronted Stratton with the full findings. He didn't flinch. I had my suspicions, he said, but this is bigger than I thought. What do we do? Wexler asked. Stratton turned to Bella. We go louder. Within 48 hours, a Senate hearing was scheduled. The room was small, closed session, but the names involved weren't. Bella, Stratton, Wexler, and Senator Armand sat on one side. On the other, representatives from the Department of Defense, a lawyer from Aerodyne Tactical, and, to Bella's barely concealed fury, Travis Beringer himself. He was older now, smooth, confident, wearing civilian grey, not uniform. He didn't recognize her at first, then she spoke. Colonel Beringer, Bella began, do you recall authorizing the abort command on Ghost Reach? I followed intel protocol, he said evenly. The AO became compromised. And did you know the drone units were recalled from cover positions minutes before the order? He paused. I don't have access to those logs. We do, Wexler interjected. Signed under your clearance code. Beringer shifted. Senator Armand leaned forward. Mr. Beringer, are you aware that Aerodyne Tactical has profited over $200 million in federal contracts since Ghost Reach, tied to drone deployment models? He didn't answer. Stratton's voice cut in. I believe we're looking at deliberate operational deception, ma'am, with fatal consequences. Bella faced Beringer directly. I lost 6 people because you wanted real-world data. And when I brought back the only jet that survived, you erased me. Beringer stared back. You disobeyed a direct order. I disobeyed a death sentence, she snapped. The room pulsed with tension. The hearing adjourned with no verdict. But the story broke within hours. Leaked testimony, internal memos and footage from QM flooded the news cycle. Civilian watchdogs called for audits. Veterans groups rallied. Bella became the unwilling face of military reform. In the following weeks, 3 congressional investigations launched. Aerodyne's stock plummeted. And the president issued a statement calling Bella Holt a symbol of resilience and truths. She didn't want it, but she accepted it, because somewhere in the swirl of chaos, something had shifted. She visited each of the families of her fallen crew, quietly, privately. She returned the dog tags she'd recovered. She told them what had really happened, and one by one they held her hands and said, "Thank you for not leaving them." In the end, that was all that mattered. Not the medals, not the headlines, not the politics, just that someone came back. Bella stood again at the memorial stone for Unit 077. This time she wasn't alone. Stratton, Wexler, the cadets from Colorado, even Senator Armand. The plaque had changed. It now read Unit 077. Operation Ghost Reach sacrificed, silenced, remembered. Bella reached out, touched the stone. Now, she said softly, we fly for real. But just as she turned away, Wexler's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and paled. Bella, you need to see this. On the display, a new satellite image. Same region, Same coordinates as a convoy, armed, moving fast. The logo on the lead vehicle wasn't military, it was Aerodyne. Bella's jaw clenched. Then it's not over. Rain fell softly across Arlington as Bella Holt stood beneath the overhang of the Pentagon's east entrance. The drops tapped her shoulders and hair like faint reminders. "You're still here," she barely noticed. Inside, down 3 levels and past 2 security checkpoints, a classified briefing was about to begin. She was no longer just a symbol. She had become a witness. The Senate Intelligence Committee had officially subpoenaed the internal logs from Operation Ghost Reach. Aerodyne Tactical was under federal investigation for ethics violations, and Bella, once erased, was now the keystone to unraveling a conspiracy that reached further than anyone wanted to admit. She was exhausted, but she wasn't done. "Ready?" Wexler asked, adjusting her suit collar beside her. "No," Bella answered, "but let's go." The room was colder than she expected, lined with steel and screens, filled with officers, lawmakers, and auditors. A giant digital map behind the central table pulsed with red markers. Chairing the session was Senator Armand, her voice crisp. "We are convened today to confirm the scope of intelligence manipulation related to Operation Ghost Reach, and to determine the degree to which defense contractors influenced mission outcomes." Bella was sworn in. She didn't blink. They began with a question she had expected. "Lieutenant Holt, were you aware that Unit 077's mission path was altered the morning of deployment?"
"Yes."
"Did anyone brief you on the presence of hostile third-party observers in the QM sector?" "No." "Did you receive any intel suggesting drone performance was being tested at the cost of human cover?" "No, but I suspected it when our backup vanished." More questions followed. Then a moment of pause. Then they played a video, drone cam footage, newly declassified. It showed Bella's jet skimming through smoke, her voice crackling over comms calling for evac, and a second angle, captured from above, showed the 2 unidentified jets flying parallel for 22 seconds before banking away. Bella didn't look away. One congressman asked, "Do you believe those aircraft were part of a separate operation?" "I believe they were insurance," she replied, "for someone else." Later, Wexler presented documentation from Aerodyne's internal messages. Phrases like live scenario optimization, non-recoverable loss deemed acceptable, and zero pilot redundancy will reset doctrine. Senator Armand's tone sharpened. These were real people, not variables, not lines on a spreadsheet. A murmur ran through the room. Back at Bella's temporary quarters, a flash drive waited. An anonymous tip. When Wexler plugged it in that night, the screen filled with raw logs. Chat windows between high-level Aerodyne execs. One line hit Bella like a punch. 077 was a proof of failure run. They weren't supposed to make it out. The next morning, Bella asked to testify again, voluntarily. This time the room was larger. Press were allowed in. She wore a plain black suit, no insignia. Her voice was steady. "They told me silence was service. What mattered most was obedience. But we followed orders and it got my crew killed. I broke orders and I brought them home. So you tell me, which one of those is loyalty?" The room fell silent. Cameras captured it all. That night, across social media and national news, Bella's testimony aired unedited. Veterans reposted it, cadets quoted it, even officials who had once denied her existence now offered cautious praise. Bella ignored it all. She had one more place to go. She flew to San Antonio, a small ranch home at the edge of the hills. There, in a tidy back garden, lived Rosa McRae, sister of Bella's old co-pilot. She opened the door, saw Bella, and wept. They sat for hours. Bella gave her Warren's tags. "He fought to the end," Bella said. "I know," Rosa whispered, "and he always believed in you." When Bella left, a new weight had been lifted, but more weighted. 2 days later, Senator Armand called. "There's going to be a purge. Internal, but quiet. They won't announce it. You won't get medals, but changes will happen." "I didn't do this for medals," Bella said. "I know," Armand replied. "That's why you deserve one." At the Air Force Academy, cadets requested that Bella speak during next year's commissioning ceremony. She declined, but she sent them something instead, a photograph. 6 dog tags lay over the cracked wing of 077. No caption. They framed it in the honor wing. Weeks later, the Department of Defense issued a quiet memorandum. Reforms to the chain of command decision oversight, independent review for classified mission design, contractor influence under audit. It was clinical, distant. But Bella knew what it meant. Behind it all, they were listening, not to her, but to the silence she had broken. She stood once more at the memorial. This time a young pilot approached her, eyes wide. "You don't know me," he said, "but I changed my track because of you. I was going drone. I'm switching to combat rescue." Bella nodded. "Bring them home." He saluted. For the first time in years she returned it, not as a ceremony, but as closure. The morning light spilled through the blinds of Bella Holt's temporary quarters at Andrews Air Force Base. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her flight boots. They were new, issued last week. She hadn't worn them yet. Her old ones were still in a storage box in Colorado, charred at the soles, the left one cracked along the seam where fire had melted the stitching. She couldn't bring herself to throw them away. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Wexler stood outside, holding a slim white envelope. Her face was unreadable. "They voted," she said simply. Bella took the envelope, opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet headed with the seal of the United States Department of Defense. Recommendation for full exoneration and posthumous commendation of Unit 077. Her hand tightened around the paper. No medal, no parade, but the record would change. They would not be forgotten. Across the country, quiet changes began taking root. Internal memos circulated through branches of the armed forces, revisiting disciplinary cases involving whistleblowers, mission survivors, and black box evidence. A new oversight committee was formed under civilian review. Bella watched it all unfold from a distance. She refused interviews, declined invitations. She had said everything she needed to say, but Washington wasn't done with her. 1 week later, she received a formal summons to the National Defense Ethics Conference, not as a witness, as a speaker. She almost didn't go. It was Stratton who convinced her. "People need to hear it from someone who bled for it," he told her, "someone who came back." She didn't respond right away, but the next morning she picked up her boots, the new ones, and she packed. The conference was held in a massive auditorium near Fort McNair. Hundreds of officers, analysts, contractors, and civilian leaders filled the seats. Bella waited backstage, wearing a slate-gray blazer over a simple white blouse, her shoulder-length blonde hair tucked neatly behind her ears. The broken-winged eagle tattoo remained hidden. She didn't need to show it anymore. Her name was announced. She stepped onto the stage. For a moment, the room was utterly still. Then came the sound of chairs shifting, people rising, a standing ovation before she'd spoken a single word. She waited for the applause to fade, then spoke. "Most of you know me because of what I said," she began, "but everything I said was because of what they did." She didn't use notes. Her voice was calm, even. "I stood at a crash site where I shouldn't have walked away. I carried 6 sets of dog tags across continents. I watched the institution I loved try to forget us, and I survived it all, not because I'm brave, but because silence isn't the same as peace." She paused. In this room are people who write policy, people who sign off on deployment models, people who decide what success looks like. So let me tell you, if success depends on people dying quietly, it's not success. The audience remained riveted. Bella continued, telling the truth without embellishment, about the mission, the betrayal, the aftermath, about Stratton, about Wexler, about Warren and Diaz and McCrae and the others who never came home, and finally, about what needed to change. When she stepped down, no one clapped right away. They were still absorbing it. Later, in the lobby, a young major approached her with red-rimmed eyes. "My father was in a mission like yours. They never cleared his name. Until now." Bella didn't speak. She just placed a hand on his shoulder and nodded. That night, back in her hotel room, Bella opened her laptop. An email had arrived from Stratton. No subject line, just a link. It opened to a draft memorandum, a proposal, formation of the Holt Doctrine. It outlined new ethical protocols for combat mission planning, clear escalation checks, independent oversight during black ops, and mandatory whistleblower protection. At the top, proposed by General Malcolm Stratton, in honor of Lieutenant Isabella Holt and the crew of Unit 077. Bella leaned back in the chair, her chest heavy. She didn't cry, she didn't smile, she just breathed. A month later, Bella returned to Colorado Springs. The Air Force Academy had changed. Murals were being repainted, statues recontextualized, and in the east wing of the Hall of Valor, a new exhibit was under construction, its centerpiece a twisted piece of fuselage from Ghost Reach Delta. Beside it, 6 pairs of boots, a faded mission patch, and a touchscreen displaying interviews, records, and recovered footage. The title above it all, The Flight That Came Back. Bella walked through quietly. No fanfare, no speech, just presence. A group of cadets entered, chatting, then noticed her. They fell silent on approach. "You're her," he said. Bella raised an eyebrow. "Depends who her is, the one who didn't leave them behind." She gave a quiet nod. He extended a small badge from his pocket, a pin shaped like the broken-winged eagle. "We wear these now, not official, but we know what it means." Bella took it, turned it in her fingers, then returned it to him. "Then carry it right," she said. As she left the exhibit, Wexler waited by the doors. "Heading out?" she asked. "Eventually. There's a request," Wexler said. "Joint Forces Command. They want a liaison for operational ethics oversight. Civilian role, quiet but permanent." Bella didn't answer, not yet. They walked side by side out into the afternoon sun, and for the first time in 13 years, the sky no longer felt like it was falling. Bella Holt hadn't said yes, yet. The offer sat in her inbox, flagged unread, but very much alive. A civilian liaison post with Joint Forces Command, operational ethics, oversight, policy access. It was the kind of position that would never have been offered to her a year ago. The kind they created now because of her, and maybe because of guilt. She stood in the visitors' lounge of Peterson's Space Force Base once more, watching the Rocky Mountains shimmer under a pale blue sky. Cadets moved across the tarmac in drill formation, their movements sharp and timed. Some of them wore pins, small silver broken-winged eagles. Quiet tribute, quiet revolution. Behind her, Stratton approached with a thermos of coffee. "You're thinking about saying no," he said, handing her the cup. "I'm thinking about why I would say yes," she replied. "You'd be able to prevent what happened to 077 from ever happening again." Bella looked out across the base. "You know that's not how these systems work. They wait until they're forced to act, and even then it's half measure." Stratton gave a tight nod. "That's why they need someone inside who's already survived the worst of it." She didn't respond. That evening, in her modest apartment on the outskirts of town, Bella opened the last sealed envelope from the box she'd carried with her since Coom. McCrae's letter. Warren McCrae had been more than a co-pilot. He'd been her compass when protocol failed. His handwriting was jagged but firm. "If you're reading this, it means they got me. Or they got all of us. Maybe you're the last one standing. If so, don't let them sanitize what happened. Don't let them turn us into a footnote. Stay loud, Holt. Stay stubborn, and if you can, go back in and change the script. Bella folded the letter carefully. Her hand hovered over the delete key on the liaison offer email, then moved away. She clicked reply. 3 weeks later, Bella arrived at her new post in Norfolk, Virginia. The building was unimpressive, a secure grey block tucked behind a maze of parking lots and perimeter fences. But inside, the corridors buzzed with importance. Commanders, analysts, policy drafters, logistics officers, all threading together the messy machinery of modern conflict. Her office was small, windowless. But the plaque outside the door read, Lieutenant Isabella Holt, RET, Senior Civilian Liaison, Ethics and Oversight, JFC. It wasn't ranked, but it was power. Her first briefing came within hours. Operation Windlock, an upcoming cross-branch deployment involving cyber and field units in Eastern Europe. Bella sat at the back of the room, listening to jargon and risk assessments until she heard a familiar phrase, projected acceptable loss threshold, 5% ground personnel. She raised her hand. The speaker blinked. Yes, Miss Holt? Bella's voice was steady. Clarify what you mean by acceptable. Who calculated that? Based on what? The room shifted. A younger intel officer stammered, Well, we use a standard risk model tied to operational cost versus mission priority. So you've budgeted for people to die, Bella said flatly. Silence. I want that model revised, she continued. Include ethical override protocols and scrub that phrase from the documentation. The room remained tense, but someone in the back nodded. Afterward, Stratton called. Word travels fast, he said. You shook a few trees. They needed shaking, Bella replied. He chuckled. You really did go back in and change the script. Not yet, she said, but I've got a pen. Bella settled into her new role with the precision of someone who had once flown through live fire with a broken altimeter. She observed first, listened more than she spoke. But when she did speak, the rooms changed. Language shifted, memos were rewritten. Mission proposals now arrived on her desk with addendums marked Ethics Review Holt. At first, some teams tried to bypass her. Passive resistance, her inbox would be left out of certain loops. Files would arrive late. She didn't react, not openly. But every omission was logged. And when she brought it to the attention of Deputy Command, the tone changed, quietly but completely. No one wanted to be the next footnote under a Holt Doctrine violation. Still, Bella knew the deeper resistance wasn't about email chains. It was culture, the kind of deeply entrenched pragmatism that views human cost as a necessary variable. One briefing after another, she heard the same terms dressed in sanitized language: collateral, minimum impact, tactical necessity. One afternoon, after reviewing a drone strike proposal in the Horn of Africa that listed civilian uncertainty zone as an acceptable field overlap, she rewrote the language herself and returned it with a single line attached. Uncertainty is not a shield for consequence. Word got around, fast. One evening, as she walked the long corridor back to her office, she saw it again, a pipe-in rocket-winged eagle, worn by a junior logistics officer on his lapel. They passed each other without words, but his nod held meaning. It had begun to spread. Wexler visited her that weekend. They met at a small diner off base, both in civilian clothes, no titles, no protocols, just two people with too many shared silences. They're watching you, Wexler said over coffee. Not just in your department. Higher, there's talk you might be pulled into a NATO oversight panel. Bella didn't look surprised. They'll resist it, she said. Of course they will. That's how you know it's working. But the pressure mounted. She began receiving direct messages from field commanders asking for off-record advice. Ethics, red flags, conflicts between row and mission success metrics. She answered them all, short, focused, never political. But the volume grew. One night, after drafting 14 separate reply memos between midnight and 3 a.m., she shut the laptop and stared at the blank wall. This wasn't sustainable. She needed structure, so she proposed it. The Holt Liaison Protocol, a formalized channel for pre-mission ethics consultations with rotating civilian advisors embedded directly into high-level planning chains. The memo was clear, assertive, and unapologetically direct. Within 72 hours, it landed on the Secretary of Defense's desk. Stratton called that afternoon. "You made them flinch," he said. "Good." But not everyone was on board. A senior advisor from the Defense Industrial Board requested a closed-door meeting. Bella agreed. The room was glass-walled and sterile. He was a tall man with white temples and a voice designed for boardrooms. "Miss Holt, we appreciate your passion, but doctrine isn't built on outrage. It's built on consistency. Risk calculation isn't cold, it's necessary." Bella didn't blink. "And when the calculations are wrong?" she asked. "When they cost lives that didn't need to be lost?" He leaned forward. "You're advocating for emotion in war." "No," she said quietly. "I'm advocating for accountability." The meeting ended in silence. But 3 days later, her protocol was greenlit for pilot implementation across 2 commands, and a week after that, she was invited to speak off the record at a policy retreat attended by representatives from allied intelligence agencies. There, in a room of suits and clipped accents, she said the words that would eventually be quoted across think tank white papers: "The line between operational necessity and moral convenience is thinner than we admit. And every time we cross it, it gets harder to find our way back." Back at Norfolk, she returned to her desk late one evening to find a manila folder slipped under her door. No sender, no label. Inside were transcripts, intercepts from an unreleased drone audit conducted 2 years earlier. It detailed a pattern of deliberate image suppression in post-strike analysis. "Civilian casualties erased frame by frame." She read every line, then read them again. Bella didn't sleep that night. The next morning, she filed a report directly to internal oversight. Not anonymous, not indirect. Full signature. By noon, her phone rang. It was Stratton. "You sure?" he asked. "If this gets out—" "It should," she said. "That's the point." Within 48 hours, a joint investigation was launched. 3 contractor teams were suspended. A working group was created to reclassify drone footage access protocols, and Bella, reluctantly, inevitably, became the face of it all once more. Wexler called her that evening. "You just picked another fight." Bella leaned against her window, watching the wind push across the water outside. "No," she said. "I just refuse to walk away from the last one." She closed her eyes and remembered Warren's words, "Change the script." And for the first time she realized she wasn't just editing the ending, she was rewriting the whole damn story. Bella Holt sat beneath the low fluorescent lights of a NATO conference room in Brussels, her eyes scanning the final page of a mission dossier stamped with 3 different clearances. The words on the page were familiar: deterrence, logistics, regional stabilization, but they no longer meant what they used to, not after what she'd seen, not after what she'd changed. The session moderator, a Norwegian colonel with a clipped accent, cleared his throat. "We would now like to hear from Lieutenant Holt, representing U.S. Joint Ethics Liaison Command." She didn't correct him. She wasn't a lieutenant anymore, not officially. But the rank had become a kind of shorthand, like calling a firefighter chief long after they'd hung up the gear. She stood, straightened the dark jacket she wore, and stepped into the center of the room. "I won't talk long," she began. "Not because I lack something to say, but because I think you all already know it. We've trained entire generations to understand rules of engagement. But what happens when the rules become excuses?" A few advisors shifted uncomfortably. Bella didn't pause. "What happens when the doctrine we write protects decisions instead of people? When collateral becomes a column, not a question?" Silence. I've watched this play out in real time. I've seen lives lost to spreadsheets, and I've seen silence turn into policy. She placed the dossier on the table in front of her. This mission, OP Sentinel Hold, is viable, but not like this. Not with the current civilian risk model, not with H-strike override placed in the hands of a single node controller. Someone from the UK delegation spoke. And what do you suggest, Miss Holt? Delayed response time? Reduced autonomy? I suggest clarity, she said, shared responsibility, and language that makes the consequences feel real to the people making the call. Another voice, this time from the French side. Do you really believe doctrine can be rewritten without weakening response effectiveness? Bella smiled faintly. I don't believe anything. I've lived it. That ended the questions. She left the room 10 minutes later. Stratton met her in the hallway. You've made them nervous, he said. They should be. They walked together past a wall of framed military charts. At the end was a mural in progress, UN peacekeepers planting communications equipment on a mountaintop. Bella stopped. They're adding a liaison officer to the next deployment, Stratton said. First time ever. She looked at him. Me? No, you're too visible now. They want someone new, but trained by you. Bella nodded slowly. So it begins. He chuckled. It already began. You're just starting to see it take shape. 2 days later, back in Norfolk, Bella held a training session for incoming ethics officers. There were 9 of them, 5 men, 4 women, varied backgrounds, law, combat, policy, human rights. She scanned the room. I'm not here to make you popular, she said. You'll be resentful, sidelined, sometimes ignored. Your job is not to win arguments. It's to make sure the right arguments are made before the wrong decisions are made. She paced slowly. There will come a moment when someone tells you, this is how it's always been done. When that happens, you'll look them in the eye and say, then maybe it's time to do better. No one took notes. They just watched her. After the session, a young woman named Arden Castillo approached her. My brother flew with 077, she said quietly. He didn't make it. I just wanted you to know. I remember. Bella placed a hand on her shoulder. Then carry it forward. Late that night, alone in her office, Bella reviewed the early results of the Holt liaison protocol. Mission adjustments, casualty projections rebalanced. Several plans were paused mid-review due to flagged ethical conflicts. Small victories, real ones. But it wasn't all clean. One flagged operation, callsign Harrogate, had been reclassified before her team could intervene. She dug deeper. The deeper she went, the darker it got. Callsign Harrogate wasn't just another joint task force op. It was a covert strike program linked to a set of private contractors operating under a veil of plausible denial. She found footage, grainy, high altitude, then transcripts. Then a comms log that ended abruptly mid-transmission. The words target neutralized were followed by dead air, and then override acknowledged. Liaison bypassed. Bella stared at the screen. They were sidestepping her. Already, she printed the logs, compiled the brief, and flew to DC without asking for permission. Stratton met her outside the building. He saw her face and didn't bother with questions. Inside, they confronted the oversight committee. At first, denials, then redirection, then silence. Bella placed the folder on the table. If this is what your doctrine of tolerance looks like, then we're not talking about ethics. We're talking about theater. A pause. Then one civilian deputy looked up. And what would you have us do? Investigate it, Bella said. Now, full audit. I want access to the contract authorizations and the strike authorizations. You don't have that clearance. Then get someone who does. Stratton backed her. So did Senator Armand. Once notified, within days, an inter-branch review was ordered. Harrogate became a keyword flagged across 3 agencies. But the deeper they pulled, the more resistance they met. Internal emails vanished. One liaison officer was reassigned without explanation. A whistleblower report was retracted. Someone was cleaning house. Bella pressed harder, filed appeals, escalated oversight, and then threats, not overt, but clear. Her office was searched after hours. Her car was followed once through downtown DC. Her laptop showed signs of remote access. She informed internal security and kept going. She wasn't afraid. She was furious. This wasn't about her anymore. It was about the very idea of accountability in a system designed to erase it. She called Wexler. "I need you back, full time." Wexler didn't hesitate. "I'll be there by morning." Together they rebuilt the audit trail, found side channels, sourced backups from unaffiliated signals intelligence partners, and they found it, a classified white paper. Authored 3 years ago, title, Tactical Ambiguity and Civilian Acceptability Modeling. It described methods for manipulating public perception post-strike through controlled release timing, language dilution, and statistical reframing. Bella held the document like it might burn her. "This is policy," she whispered. This was deliberate. She knew what had to be done, and she knew there would be consequences. Bella stood in the hallway outside her office, eyes fixed on the framed photo that had been anonymously mailed to her last month. It showed Unit 077 just before deployment. 6 smiles, dusty boots, nothing heroic, just human, the kind of image that Doctrine forgot. Behind her, Wexler approached with a flash drive. "It's confirmed," she said. The white paper wasn't a theory. It was implemented during 3 separate operations, including one last year, target zone just outside Aleppo. The numbers were scrubbed, civilian losses reframed as local conflict casualties. Bella took the drive. Her hand was steady. Her voice wasn't. "They're laundering ethics," Wexler nodded, "and now they know we know." Bella turned to her. "Then we publish, not through the system. Not this time. We go to the press, anonymous if we must, but we release it. That'll end your liaison role," Wexler warned. "I'm not here for longevity," Bella said. "I'm here for the truth." That night they drafted the leak. Not all of it, just enough, just the undeniable core. A white paper, a date, a proof of falsified reports, enough to crack the silence. At 3:17 a.m. it went live. By sunrise the fire had started, and Bella Holt, once erased from the record, was now the one setting it right, with no intention of asking permission again. The fallout came fast. By 7:45 a.m., Bella's secure line lit up with a call from Stratton. No greeting, no pleasantries. They're scrambling. Internal Affairs, DoD PR, Intelligence Joint Task Group. You lit a fuse they thought was buried. Bella sipped her coffee. They buried it too shallow. He exhaled sharply. "You'll be called to testify again. Let them." By 9 a.m., 6 major outlets had picked up the leak. Headlines screamed of falsified recon data, manipulated satellite overlays, and drone withdrawal protocols rewritten in real time. The words "tactical ambiguity doctrine" trended like wildfire. At 11:30, the Pentagon issued a measured statement. Preliminary findings are being evaluated. No final conclusions have been drawn. By 2 p.m., the narrative was no longer theirs to control. Internal memos surfaced. Retired officers broke silence. And on live broadcast, a former drone technician wept while describing how his footage had been digitally cleaned. Civilian casualties turned into neutral heat signatures. Bella didn't watch any of it. She was preparing. The summons arrived by courier. Closed session, 48 hours. This time, not just a testimony, an inquiry into national accountability. Stratton sent her one word. "Ready?" She responded, "Always." That night, Bella walked again through the shadows of Arlington. Her boots echoed between headstones that had always felt like mirrors. At the memorial for Unit 077, someone had pinned a small eagle crest to the stone, worn, tarnished, real. She clipped it to her coat and walked into history. Inside the hearing room, it was colder than she remembered, cameras disabled, security thick. Senator Armand presided, her expression a carved blade. Bella stood before them, alone, calm, certain. "You're here of your own volition?" Armand asked. "Yes, ma'am. You released material under national classification seals. I released a truth that was being smothered. Why now?" Bella's voice didn't waver. "Because more names are being added to these memorials, and no one's asking why. Because silence is no longer survival, it's complicity." The room fell silent. Another senator asked, "Are you accusing the Department of Defense of knowingly misleading both Command and Congress?" "I'm not accusing them, I'm proving it." She handed over a second flash drive. Full logs, intercepted directives, original signatures, dates that lined up with drone retreat protocols, a side-by-side visual of unaltered versus doctored heat maps. The moment the screen displayed a red signature reading Colonel Travis Beringer, the room shifted. An aide dropped his pen. One staffer whispered, "He's still active on the Joint Procurement Advisory Board." Armand leaned forward. "Do you understand the gravity of what you've brought us?" "Yes." "And you're willing to accept the consequences?" Bella stood tall. "I already have." The backlash came in waves. Some pundits demanded she be court-martialed for treason. Others called for medals, parades, public apologies. But Bella didn't respond. She wasn't the story. The truth was, veterans across the country sent letters. "Because of you, I spoke up. Because of you, I didn't fire. Because of you, I finally told my daughter why I never talk about the war." Anonymous insiders began leaking more tactical reports, retroactive mission reclassifications, audit exemptions signed with matching initials. Pressure built. Bella was removed from her advisory post. No trial, no indictment. Just a coded line in the Defense Personnel Management System. Separation due to breach of protocol. She accepted it. And then she built something new. The Holt Commission for Ethical Warfare was born in a rented office 2 blocks from the Air and Space Museum. Its first donors were 4 families from Unit 077. Its first staffer, Arden Castillo. Its mission, monitor, document and advocate for ethical standards across all operational theaters, regardless of badge or flag. Within 6 months, their work led to a complete congressional hearing on autonomous weapons testing. 2 programs were suspended. And Bella? She didn't speak again until the day they renamed a lecture hall at the Air Force Academy. No ceremony, just a plaque. Bella Holt Lecture Hall, for the lessons we nearly buried. That night, she recorded a single speech, unedited, 1 take. Standing outside the gates she once saluted through, she looked directly at the lens. "I didn't do anything extraordinary. I just said no. I said no to letting numbers erase names. I said no to orders that forget what they're sworn to protect. I said no to calling strategy what was really silence. If you remember anything from all of this, remember that it aired once and went viral across every base network. A year passed. Bella returned to Colorado for the first time since the graduation. She didn't expect anyone to recognize her. But as she stepped onto the tarmac of a forward training wing, a young woman jogged toward her. Sharp posture, steady gait, flight patch marked C-12 ethics lead. "Miss Holt? Yes, I'm Lieutenant Arden Castillo. You trained me." Bella's eyes crinkled. "I remember. I'm deploying next month. They assigned me to a live unit, embedded review." Bella blinked. "The mission has one now?" "They all do, since 2 months ago." Arden reached into a jacket. I was told this belonged to you. It was a new patch, 77. Beneath the eagle, we remember. Bella took it. No words. The cadet saluted. Bella returned it. And as the next wave of jets thundered overhead, Bella didn't flinch. She looked skyward and whispered to herself, "This time, they're not flying alone." A week later, a sealed envelope arrived at her Denver address. An embossed NATO crest, a formal invitation, keynote speaker at the upcoming Ethics in Conflict Summit. Bella didn't attend, she didn't reply. Instead, she sent back a single photograph, her shoulder half in shadow, faded now but unmistakable. The tattoo of a broken-winged eagle, taped beneath the image, 5 typed words, "I already made my speech, it's still flying." Bella Holt didn't miss the uniform. She missed the silence between engines, the way the sky pressed against her thoughts when altitude stole the noise from everything else. In the civilian world, there was too much chatter, too much performance. Even truth now had to speak louder than the lies to be heard. It has been 1 year since the leak. It has been 6 months since the Senate hearings concluded. 4 since the first set of internal audits confirmed every word she'd said. But the consequences, those were slower. She lived in a modest 2-bedroom house on the outskirts of Annapolis now. Quiet street, retired neighbors. Her yard was overgrown, not from neglect, but from the lack of urgency. She hadn't picked up a weapon in nearly 2 years. Her weapon now was a pen, a microphone, a series of late-night documents typed with calloused fingers and a jaw set firm. She ran the Holt Commission from her converted garage. 6 staffers, rotating volunteers. Wexler ran legal. A former human rights analyst oversaw intel vetting. The rest were veterans or family of those who never came back. The cases came in weekly. Misclassified strikes, suppressed footage, field ethics violations rewritten as fog of war. Some were decades old, others were happening now. Bella read every one. She didn't speak at rallies, she didn't sign books, she didn't let herself become the icon they tried to turn her into. She did the work. Quietly, every file, every affidavit, every trembling confession. But some days the silence came back. The silence she missed, the kind that came before the storm. One Tuesday afternoon she received an envelope with no return address. Inside, a single printed page. Coordinates, date, no explanation. She ran it through the system. The coordinates pointed to a village near the Kunar Valley in eastern Afghanistan. The date, 7 years ago, the same week she had been in Com. She pulled older reports, found nothing. The village had no official record of a strike, but then she called a contact, a freelance war correspondent with a history of going off-grid. He called back 2 hours later. "That village? I was there. There was a drone strike. They said it was insurgents, but I met a woman who buried 5 children. There was no insurgent cell. They hit the school." Bella's voice dropped. "Were you threatened?" "Not directly, but 2 months later, my visa was revoked." "No explanation." "You think it's connected to—" "It's all connected." She hung up and called Wexler. "I need every authorization code from Drone Command for May of that year. I want to know who signed off, who reviewed, who rewrote." Wexler didn't ask questions. She just said, "I'm on it." 2 days later, the documents arrived. The strike had been listed as surgical, target confirmed as hostile, but the heat signature match was based on a single signal pinged from a repurposed cell phone. Not a combatant, a teacher. Bella stared at the words. Her chest tightened. She flagged the file for priority casework and compiled the metadata for the Commission's next quarterly report. But something about the original message, the envelope, the anonymity, stuck with her. She checked the mail again the next morning. Another envelope, no return address. Inside, a satellite image, blurry, burned edges, and a handwritten note. They did it again. This time, no footage exists. Bella didn't go to internal oversight. She went to someone older. Colonel Miriam Vance, retired, respected former director of Combat Surveillance Archives. Vance had always been a grey area ally, sympathetic but cautious. She met Bella in a greenhouse outside Baltimore. Among the orchids and misted glass, they spoke like spies. "Why now?" Vance asked. "Because someone's trying to bait us," Bella said. "Or warn you." "Same thing." Vance offered her a flash drive. "I pulled this before I left. Never submitted it." A strike analysis, Burkina Faso. 2019. The numbers were wrong. The target wasn't even there. The only bodies found were civilians. Bella pocketed the drive. "Why didn't you come forward?" Vance sighed. "Because people like you hadn't made space for it yet. Now maybe it's different." That night Bella opened the file. It was worse than Vance had said. Not just the strike, but the language terms like intelligence drift, post-strike acceptability, and narrative softening. These weren't accidents, they were doctrine. She called Wexler. "We need to publish again." Wexler didn't hesitate. "I'll prep the legal shield." By Friday, the Holt Commission uploaded a new dossier. It didn't name names, not yet, but it laid bare the mechanics. The quiet war within the war, where data was massaged until the dead fit the narrative. The response was different this time. Not rage, not a protest, exhaustion. People were tired of being surprised. Tired of realizing the institutions they trusted had once again lied or bent truth into something unrecognizable. But underneath that exhaustion, a slow build. Not a fire, a resolve. That weekend, Bella visited the academy again, unannounced. She sat in the back of the lecture hall during the ethics elective. The cadets didn't notice her at first. Then one turned, another nudged a friend. When the professor paused, a hand went up. A cadet, pale hair, sharp eyes, asked, "Ma'am, is it true you were court-martialed?" Bella stood slowly. "No, I was erased." "Which is worse?" The room went silent. She didn't stay long. But when she left, one of the younger cadets ran after her. "I'm applying to be the next Holt Fellow. I just wanted you to know. I read all of it." Bella smiled, faint but real. "Then do better." As she drove away, rain began to fall. But she didn't turn on the wipers. She let it blur the road ahead for a while. It was honest that way. Clear but not easy. Like truth. And somewhere out there, more was coming. 3 weeks after the second dossier dropped, Bella Holt found herself walking alone through the National Archives. She wasn't there for the ceremony or symbolism. She was there to read. She moved past tourists and glass cases until she reached the restricted records wing, where Wexler waited with a key card and a tired smile. "They finally approved our request," Wexler said. Bella nodded. "Took them long enough." The room was cold, low-lit and quiet. 2 archivists stood by, silent. On the center table were 6 declassified operational ledgers, some decades old, others recent. Bella opened the first. The name on the first page wasn't hers, but it could have been. Similar pattern, similar errors, different war. As they read through the ledgers, a picture began to form. This hadn't started with her generation. It hadn't ended with hers either. From Vietnam to Fallujah to the Horn of Africa, the same tactics emerged. Language, delay, statistical suppression. The names changed. The numbers didn't. Bella placed a fingertip on one entry. This pilot tried to call off the strike. They were overruled. Wexler frowned. Same justification phrase, probable hostile convergence. Bella leaned back, a phrase that means nothing, and cost lives. They stayed until closing. Bella copied the relevant files, signed them out, and left into the night air without speaking. The wind bit harder than she expected. Maybe it was age, maybe it was knowing more than she wanted. Back at her home, she spread the pages across her dining table. She labeled patterns in red ink, cross-referenced keywords, and highlighted doctrine loops. When dawn broke, she was still at the table. Wexler arrived with coffee. "We have enough," she said softly. Not yet, Bella replied. We have proof of a system. Now we show the legacy. 1 week later, the Holt Commission released its third and final report. It was different this time, not a condemnation but a map. It showed how terminology had evolved to escape accountability. After every scandal, a new euphemism replaced the old. How public faith was managed like a commodity. The report didn't name enemies. It is named habits. It named language. And it closed with a statement from Bella herself. We were taught that war is a last resort, but no one taught us how to live with the silence afterward. This isn't a report about failure. It's a record of patterns. And maybe, if we learn to see them early enough, we won't keep writing the same ending. The statement was quoted across think tanks, translated in military schools, and debated in universities. A retired general emailed her privately, "You didn't destroy the institution. You forced it to grow teeth around its conscience. Thank you." Bella didn't respond. She didn't need to. 1 month later, Arden Castillo deployed overseas. Before she left, she visited Bella's home. They sat on the porch steps with tea. "I'm scared," Arden admitted. "Good," Bella said. "That means you're awake. I read everything. But what if I miss something? You will, but you'll catch the next one, and that's enough." Arden smiled. "You ever think you'd end up here?" Bella looked up at the sky. "No, I thought I'd vanish like the rest of them, but you didn't." "No, I remembered, and I made sure someone else could too." Arden stood. "Then I'll do the same." They hugged once. Quiet, firm, final. When Bella went back inside, she passed the hallway where the photo of Unit 077 still hung. She touched the edge of the frame. "I kept my promise," she whispered. The house settled around her. Outside, the wind shifted, and the silence returned. But this time, it didn't hurt. It held. Some stories end with justice, others with silence. But every now and then, a story ends by handing the truth to someone else and trusting they'll carry it forward. Bella Holt never set out to be remembered. She set out to remember. To honor those lost in footnotes and files, to speak when systems told her to stay quiet, and to prove that integrity doesn't need a uniform to stand tall. Through files, through fire, through the failures of those in power, she stood, and by standing, she made room for others. Arden, Wexler, the nameless voices who now have a place to speak. Because of her, the silence no longer belongs to the system. It belongs to the truth. Where are you watching from? Tell us in the comments, your city, your base, your quiet place. And if Bella's story moved you, share it with someone who still believes dignity matters. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Veteran Biker, where real stories echo long after the last line fades. We'll see you in the next one. And until then, remember to do better, and remember to never forget